Okay. Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Edward Luca. I'm an academic liaison librarian at the University of Sydney, and my colleague here, Jackie Edwards, is an information services librarian at the University of Technology, Sydney. So today we're actually presenting work that was undertaken at UTS, and we want to present a bit of a case study for you. There's been a lot of conversations sort of recently in sort of libraries, in academic libraries in particular, around the nature of what academic librarianship is today and whether that role is kind of changing. I think we all acknowledge that it is changing to some extent, and I think kind of an easy way of sort of summarizing that shift in our roles is that we're moving from a sort of library-centric conception of library services towards a user-centered conception of library services. And what I mean by that is moving beyond the library as a physical space, whilst acknowledging that it is still very important, but considering that we need to be where our clients are, be they students or academics. And I think there's a great role that we can play in terms of being embedded in coursework, and that's really what we want to talk about today. So I'm going to present to you a model for sort of a partnership between academic staff and librarians to deliver a particular subject, and we'll go through sort of why we've done this. We'll detail the model, so how did we actually sort of go about doing this, and then we'll talk about some of the outcomes, so hopefully it's interesting to you. So, just to start off, so as I mentioned, academic librarianship is changing, and I think increasingly the library wants to position itself in a way that shows that we're sort of involved in the sort of teaching and research initiatives of the university, that we're very much involved in kind of core business for the university. And increasingly, I think there's a sort of role for those professional sort of library skills, whether we call them information literacy skills or digital literacy skills, to be embedded in the curriculum in an integrated fashion which supports sort of graduate attributes and all of that kind of thing. Alongside this, there's also this kind of notion of the library as publisher. I think we all acknowledge that scholarly communication as a landscape is rapidly changing and evolving, and I think the library's definitely got a place there in being part of this kind of ecosystem. So I'll start by introducing the subject, which is sort of the case study for this presentation. And the subject in question is a subject called Energy Science and Technology, and that's a second-year undergraduate subject which all students need to take. The focus of the sort of course content is around theoretical thermodynamics and electric energy production. And typically this is a very kind of theory-heavy subject, primarily kind of textbook focused, a lot of sort of examinations and that kind of thing, and fairly dry by all accounts with student feedback surveys and the like. So what we wanted to do was revitalize this subject in a way, and the way we've gone about doing this is to introduce a journal article as assessment kind of idea, which will actually go on to be 60% of the marks allocated in the subject. But what we wanted to get students to do was to work in small groups to prepare a journal article. And we then wanted to publish that using the university's press. And here it is. So this is PAM Review. This is the student journal in question. So every single student in this subject, and we had about 40 the last time we ran it, we're now around 50, worked in small groups of around 5 students to produce a journal article. They then go through a process of peer review with fellow students, and they would then publish it open access with UTS ePress, which is the university's publishing house. This is quite an opportunity for us because we move beyond those traditional sort of library skills of a literature review. We start to consider things around sort of publication literacy, around what the kind of context for research is today, what it means to have a researcher identity, what it means to communicate your research to the general public. And so we had the opportunity to integrate many of those skills throughout this subject. So back in 2015, looking at our graduate attributes, this particular subject was only really facing one of those, which was around disciplinary knowledge. And that's not surprising, really, considering, you know, they're at university. But many of the other things were kind of lacking. And then once the library got involved and on board, the subject looks a little bit more like this. By sort of rethinking the assessment tasks, we've been able to quite dramatically change the number of graduate attributes that we actually target and deliver a more kind of authentic learning experience. One of the challenges with a subject like this is it's hard to develop a learning experience because it's a highly theoretical kind of thing. The material is quite theoretical. And to simulate a sort of real-world scenario where you'd be kind of engaging with the coursework was a bit of a challenge. So we thought about maybe applying a kind of research context where people work in a group, in a team, leveraging each other's skills. That's exactly what we did. And I wanted to detail the model because often I think it's quite useful to see where the library instruction actually sits and sort of how integrated it is throughout the entirety of the subject. So we start in week 2, and bearing in mind this is second year undergrad, this is still an opportunity to do many of the kind of introductory kind of stuff to the library, and also an introduction around what is the nature of scholarly literature, retrieving the full text of an article. Even when students get to second year university, you'd be surprised how many of these skills are still lacking, which is quite alarming. Also in week 3, and this is where we move into kind of reference management. So we're looking at the reference management tool RefWorks, and we look at 2 large multidisciplinary databases, Scopus and Web of Science. We do a bit of basic keyword searching. At this point, they have a fair idea kind of what sort of topic they would like to be looking at. And we also look at exporting those references into RefWorks. So all the kind of reference stuff. At the moment, we haven't gotten too crazy. These are fairly kind of standard liaison librarian kind of things that we might be imparting. This is where things get kind of interesting. In week 4, we start to talk a little bit more about academic publishing, what the landscape looks like today, and an introduction to the peer review process. Even though students spend their kind of university days looking for scholarly materials, many of them still lack an understanding of what scholarly materials actually are. We'll also talk about open access because we see this as being an essential part of scholarly communication today. It actually underpins a lot of what we're doing with the press at UTS. We introduce the press itself, and Jackie will speak to that a little bit more. We also talk about communicating and disseminating your research. In terms of our support to academics, we spend a lot of time getting them on board with the conversation and blogs and social media and all that kind of stuff. And it's about moving research from the traditional journal article into sort of areas that have greater impact for the general public. And so we want to touch on some of this stuff early on in this course also. In week 5, notice that the library is still here. We're still hanging on. And I think this is important because the students began to view us as co-teachers. We were very much a collaborator in this subject, and we're sort of seen on equal footing with the academic, which based on the literature and sort of what I observed in the past, that's not too common a kind of setup. So we do our final concept mapping of the topic, and we go into our advanced database searching. We look at techniques like citation chaining, evaluating a journal's quality, and now that we have a consideration of some of the issues that go into affecting sort of journal article publishing and all of that, they have a greater understanding of the context, I guess, in which these articles come to be in their databases. We also get students to create a Grammarly account. So again, it's uniting not just, I guess, the library databases, but also some of the other resources that the library provides access to, giving them kind of an all-of-library experience here. Flash forward towards the end now, and we talk about their researcher profile. And we actually get students to set up profiles using ORCID, using Google Scholar, and a platform called Grow Kudos, which I really like, and it allows you to kind of connect different bits of academic work together. So you might have a journal article, but then you do a blog about the process of writing that article, so you can then link the two together, and it gives you metrics on all of that. We also talk about sort of academic social networks sort of more generally, just so that people are aware that they're part of the landscape, but we don't really go down the sort of route of advising that they get on board with them necessarily. Now, so academics need to do their literature searching, they need to write up their article, they need to publish it, but they also need to go to a conference and talk about it. So we wanted to simulate that kind of environment as well. So using one of the event space in UTS Library, we set up kind of a mini conference or symposium, and we got students to speak in their groups about their research. And this was not to sort of reiterate the journal article, but to think about how they would translate that to others who are in the field, but not necessarily as invested in their particular topic as they are. This is also a really lovely point to get the subject coordinator to look at the metrics for these articles, because the articles have now been online for a couple of weeks, and because they're open access, we can start to have a look at some of the metrics and actually see the impact that these articles go on to have. And I think that's really quite interesting, because immediately students are able to see kind of the fruits of their labour there. The article is there online, it's got a DOI, it's indexed in Google Scholar. We start to see that people all around the world are beginning to engage with their work. I'll hand it over to Jackie now to talk a little bit about the outcomes.
Thank you, Ed. Is there anything you'd like to ask Ed before we press on? At the end, all right? No, no? Oh, okay. Keep going. Okay, so UTSC Press, I have some postcards around. It's one of the oldest scholarly open access publishers in Australia. We have 11 peer-reviewed academic journals. I can't and over 30 open access books and monographs have been published, and we've got a lot of work planned at the moment. 8 book projects are planned for just this year. So, and now here we are. I wanted to show you a photo of our mini conference, and this is perhaps one of the coups that we had. This is the physics students in the library. There they are. So, and we did something that was a bit mean. We started this course working with Jürgen, and gradually sort of building it up. And Jürgen's usual thing at the end of the semester was to sit around with boxes of pizzas and having a chat and handing out the print copies of the journals. So we said, look, come on, Jürgen, we can do better than that. How about we do something in the library using our flexible space? And it grew into this kind of mini conference, which, and there's 2 lads at the back there. They got there an hour early for the presentations, and we sent a personalised invitation to all the students to come for the mini conference, and also the Dean of the Faculty. So at the back there, there were quite a few of the, in the end not everybody came, but they were invited to the event. The Dean and our DVC, the head librarian, the university librarian sitting there, and some of the students invited their friends along. So it was really nice to have this kind of event, and they took it very seriously, as you can see. And there was no assessment involved in this particular part, but we might include this as an assessment next time. Okay, so this was PAM Review. It's a little bit of background information on the stats from last year. So as you can see, PAM Review gets a lot of downloads and sessions in Australia, but are very much used across in America, over there, and in Asia and India. So the peer-to-peer learning between the students has been very interesting, and we did do a bit of digging around in the back end, but we need to look into a bit more. The age group is about the 18 to 24, so it's other university students, especially in the States, looking at their topics and using their materials. We assume finding it from Google Scholar for the most part. And the student feedback has been so far very positive. They are a little bit nervous, as you'd imagine, at first, and it's a very different thing to actually be a published author, especially in your second year. But the first, I think I'll let you read those quotes. But the last one is probably the one we thought was most interesting. There are ways to pass tests without understanding, but this way we have to understand. And I thought that one was the most useful. It's chugging through, doing their assessment. But this one, they have to publish their peer-to-peer reviewing. Jürgen does the editing, and there's a team of about 3 people in UTS ePress who edit the journal to be publication level. But the students have to actually understand their topic to present it to other people. And that's some stats that we have here. So we've had, and that was March this year. So as we speak, the students are studying. Our mini conference this year is going to be on the 4th of June. But you can see the sessions are quite reasonable for a student journal. So there you are. And you can see the bit of a spike there. October, November is the US in Northern Hemisphere academic year. So that's quite good. The stats there are very good. Okay, so the future. We're really pleased with how it's gone with PAM Review, and Edward has moved on to Sydney Uni, and we're going to, hopefully, this model will be used there as well. It is quite a difficult thing to do. We only have 13 weeks at UTS of semester at the moment, and it's a really tough call to get it ready and done in time. We're a bit concerned not to rush it too much. It would have been hard. Previously we had 20 weeks of semester, so the project started when we had 20 weeks. So if we hadn't have had the longer time, this would be much harder. But it's much more satisfying than normal assignment. So we really feel like the librarian has a key role in curriculum design and delivering this course. In order to make it work, the library's picked up at least 4 or 5 sessions of which we do the teaching. And yeah, we're very keen to make sure that we partner with the academics for publishing. And that's kind of the PAM Review website. And we've got 3 student journals. PAM Review is one of them, and our various ePress there. So we probably need more staff if everyone in the uni wants to have a student journal, but we're hoping to make sure that PAM Review is a consistent one and stays on for a few years. I'll just put Ed to pass on to finish off and show you the website.
I thought we might just have a little look. So here we are in the Student Journals section, and I'll go over to CanView. So this is just epress.lib.uts.edu.au. We've got our most recent issue, and as I mentioned, this is an open access publication, which is quite fantastic. So here we go, here are the articles, and you can see they're in their small groups. Let's go on to the first one. Link to their Awkward IDs as well, so I can click on the student, for example, and go over to his Awkward profile. And this is fantastic, and for us it allows us to kind of retain them in a way. So if they go on to publish more kind of research, we'll actually be able to see their kind of trajectory and see that it started here, which is quite exciting. So we can have a look at the PDF. And as I said, they have DOIs, and what's particularly interesting kind of now is going into Google Scholar and seeing that some of them have actually been cited, which is quite sort of validating for students. So there's one of the articles. There we go, so that's the press and that's the journal. Yeah. Did anyone have any questions about it? Yeah. Oh. It's okay. We've got a whole 5 minutes, so don't even worry. Yeah, that's a very good point. I guess part of it is that they were doing a meta-analysis, so they were aggregating existing papers. But if they were to go and conduct their own research, and they would need to go through ethics clearance and that kind of thing, that is touched on in other subjects in the course, but in the context of this particular unit. Yeah. Part of it is kind of touched on when we talk about open access, and we do touch on Creative Commons licensing as well. There's someone that, yeah. Yes, and that's going to be one of the challenges, I guess, and particularly, as Jackie mentioned, if more sort of units get on board. But I think it's been quite a learning experience for the library to deliver a subject in this format, and I think probably now we have a better understanding of how we would go about doing that. I guess as the class size gets better, that kind of peer mentoring becomes more and more important, and the subject coordinator may not be able to deliver the same level of sort of one-to-one kind of feedback. But I think building in sort of mechanisms to support peer-to-peer learning, even if you have a rubric and you're evaluating another student's work on that, or you're unpacking assessment criteria and that kind of thing, I think there are techniques. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I should say, yeah, so good question. This was face-to-face, and the library was involved in weeks 2, 3, 4, 5, 11 and 12. The subject coordinator was there as well, so the librarian and the lecturer are seen as kind of partners in this, and that would be sort of a 1-hour lecture, 2-hour tutorial, I'd say in most cases, in terms of the delivery week to week. Yes, in each week. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the remaining weeks, so that would be, my maths is not so great, 7 or 8. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a long time. We do have a study guide on our library website, which is embedded in the UTS online account. It is a lot of, yeah, we teach an hour of their tube time. Yeah.
Do you see as a future of the library? How do you explain to all other faculty to how sustainable
Well, we've thought about that. We'd have a good chat about that with student feedback, but we are thinking of other journal types, that we might have a continuous journal. This is hard to do because there's a publication date, and it's hard and fast, and it is a little bit unsustainable for librarians to be there all the time. But we do have our heads up, which is a video presentations that we can do. Scaling it up will be a bit tricky, but it depends on the subject discipline. But it's more or less a library class. It's not something we don't do anyway. It's embedded inside. So we would normally, it was a bit weird sitting inside in a physics lab with all the pipes and everything else. BYO device, but we just have to go where we are. But well, why not?
But I think that's in some ways that's the point. That's about being embedded. I think we should spend less time sitting at our desks in the library and more time out at the faculty, being where students are. There's a huge focus at UTS on face-to-face learning, but you could augment that with online modules, lecture recordings, and that kind of thing as well.
Coming back to the whole sustainability, scalability aspect of this, because it seems like a lot of face-to-face interaction. Are you working perhaps or considering working with the academic to see how we can make some more of it self-paced learning?
Yes, we'll have to sit down at the end of this year and look into that. But we can do, Scott, who works for UTS Press, he gave a lecture about open access. That could be an online lecture. But there's still a good thing about being face-to-face with the students. And I think it works well that they know us all as people. They know that we're working hard behind the scenes to get this ready in time. And we do have, I can't remember how many librarians we have. We do have, a group of librarians. This isn't something too difficult to teach. It really is our day job. It could be any of us really doing this. So hopefully the scale would work. We did talk a little bit as well about having case studies in a book form. That might be a little bit easier too, rather than the hard and fast, the journals due on the 4th of June. But it's been a lot of fun, and the students seem to be getting a lot out of it, and to be able to be a published author. It makes me feel, well, everyone should be a published author then at university. Perhaps we could scale it that far. Why not scale it that far? Why shouldn't there be something for each faculty of this type, so everyone comes out with a DOI?
I think another point just to add to that was that the academic actually approached the library initially. So the academics saw the library as having expertise in these areas and wanted to work with us as proper partners in this subject. So it was not anything that was being imposed on anyone, but it was an open kind of conversation.